Bob, and welcome. So my name is Ken Kriz. I'm professor at UIS, and as Bob said, I will be moderating this session. So the structure of the session is each of the panelists will have 5 minutes to present their remarks on the fire department study, and then there will be a 20-minute panel discussion, which I will moderate. And then we'll turn it over to you for questions. So I'm going to try and keep the speakers on schedule. So I'm going to have to find my timer app here and make sure that everybody sticks to 5 minutes. So I'll introduce the panelists, although I'm sure most of you know them pretty well. So on the far left is Bill McCarty, who's the budget director for the city. Next to him is Mayor Langfelder and Chief Blau. I hope I got that right. Blau. Okay.
It's all right.
Chief
Nobody
Blau.
gets it right.
All right. And then Bob Gray. So, and in fact, well, actually, no, the order of the initial remarks will be Director McCarty first, followed by Chief Blau, and Mayor Langfelder and Mr. Gray. So without further ado, and I'm going to start my timer here. Director McCarty, take it away.
Wow, ask the mayor and the city council. I can barely introduce myself in 5 minutes, so this is going to be hard to do. Before I get into the why from my perspective on the report, I really do want to talk about the who did it, a little bit about then, and what it isn't before I get into what it was. But before I start, I do want to thank the Citizens Club for this opportunity, for their interest in the report, and for giving us the time today to talk a little bit about it. And I appreciate all of you coming. So what is CPSN? The Center for Public Safety Management is an offshoot of the International City Managers Association. They spun off to focus on public safety issues and consulting. Now, this is a firm that we've actually been talking to for a number of years, even prior to Mayor Langfelder's tenure. We met with them back when Mayor Houston was here. And then we met with them again early in Mayor Langfelder's term. We'd always kept the lines of communication open. It wasn't like we just got this firm at the last second. It just, the circumstances didn't align to bring them in until just a year or two ago when we did it. Now, this particular firm, what we like about them is that they provide different perspectives. The team is not made up of just ex-firefighters or fire chiefs. It's not just ex-city managers, city administrators. It's both. And in some cases, there are individuals on the team who have both perspectives, who served in the fire service but then moved into, say, city administration later on. So that was very helpful to us and something that we thought was very appealing and why we brought this group in. So let me talk about briefly what it wasn't. What this report never was an attack on the fire department. It was never meant to impugn the fire department, its operations, or the people that work there. This never was a situation where it was being guided by the administration in any way, shape, or form. There was more than just a little bit of innuendo throughout this process that the administration, that the fix was in, that we were dictating exactly what was and wasn't in the report. And that just simply couldn't be further from the truth. Anybody who's seen the report recognize that to be the case, because the report was very complimentary, as it should be, of our fire department. We have a wonderful fire department. They provide great service. The individuals that work there are wonderful individuals who do a great job. So there's certainly never been any question about that. But that brings us to, why did we do it? What was the purpose? And from my perspective, there were a couple of different reasons why. A couple of questions that I personally wanted to see answered. The first question is, given the cost constraints that we seem to continually run into here at the city, and I've now been the budget director, or essentially the CFO, for 11 years, longer than anybody else ever has done the job. So I've been through ups and I've been through downs. And back in 2018, we went through some serious downs. We had a really difficult fiscal situation, and in the end, the city council and the mayor reluctantly had to increase some of our revenue in order to cope with it. So it was at that point in time when we started looking at the cost effectiveness of all of our departments, and really the one department that's been relatively left intact throughout all the downs that we've had dating back to the Great Recession is the fire department. The police department's down 30 or 40 sworn officers. Public Works went from 220 down to 180, and every other department's been similarly impacted except for the fire department for a variety of reasons. So we decided that it might be a good idea to have someone come in and look at our fire department. We want to provide good service. The question is, could we get an outside perspective on how we can provide that good service maybe in a more cost-effective manner? So that was question one. Question two is, our fire department is pretty much the same structure it's been for decades, but times have changed. And given our service matrix and the changes that have gone along with that, is our fire department structured the right way, operationally speaking? Are other departments out there across the country doing things differently? Have they adapted to changing times? And I want to give you just a quick example before I turn it over to the chief. Page 113 of the report provides a statement or a statistics that I found quite shocking when we got the information. And on that page, it talks about how we have 15 big red fire trucks on duty 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's 131,400 available hours of big red truck time. They can go out and fight fires primarily, which is what I think originally they were built for, but of course they've adapted and there are other things we do with it. Of that 131,400 hours of on-duty time that's available, the actual amount of time during the period that the report looked at where they were fighting an actual fire, not a false alarm or anything like that, not a cat in a tree situation, but just a fire, was 1,340 hours. 1.02% of available time is how much they were out there actually battling fires with the big red trucks. We're providing, and the chief I'm sure will touch on this, we're doing more in life support. It's medical response. It's really the way the department's been going. So the question we had going in, or at least I know I certainly did, is can we be doing that in a more efficient manner? Can we do that in a better manner, maybe with paramedics or with ambulance type vehicles, something that provides faster response. We also wanted to know about station locations. So operationally speaking, we wanted to know, are we structured the right way? Should we be doing something different? And I'm sure with that, my time is about up, so I'm going to turn it over to the birthday boy, Chief Blau.
Ah.
Happy birthday, Chief.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and please.
Thanks for having me this morning, and there is no place I would rather be on my birthday than here speaking with you about fire protection EMS service. Thanks for having me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brandon Blau. I have 23 years experience with Springfield Fire Department, including over 4 years on staff, and for the last year and a half or so, I've been your fire chief. I'm born and raised in Springfield. I attended Cathedral Grade School, Ursuline Academy, served in the National Guard at Camp Lincoln. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. My wife teaches at SHG. My son went to Glenwood and just graduated from Vanderbilt. He'll be attending SIU School of Medicine in the fall. So we're very grounded in this community. It's something that's very important to me. My father and my uncle were both firefighters. This is something that I'm passionate about. This was my goal, was to be in front of you today discussing things like this. To give you a background on our department, it was started in 1839. We have 197 sworn personnel across 3 divisions. We are a Class 1 ISO rated department, which means there's about 400, a little more than 400 of us in the country out of 50,000 departments that are Class 1. So we're in the top 1% of the country. You have an outstanding fire department. Ours is an all hazards fire department. We do a litany of disciplines, including hazmat, mitigation, technical and high angle rescue, water, dive, rescue. We have sonar ops, and we just started we have some drone pilots that we're using that help us with a myriad of different things. All of our sworn personnel are EMTs, with the majority of them now being EMTIs, paramedics, and even some RNs. So Last year, we ran 21,747 calls, which was a new record. Over 12,000 of those, as Director McCarty said, were medical calls. The longer that we continue to provide service, the more and more medical there is. People are living longer. We have, a side of town a couple of sides of town now that have, a demographic that needs more medical than others do. But our care results every year in people walking out of the hospital, which didn't used to occur from things like cardiac arrests, strokes, motor vehicle crashes, traumas, all those kind of things. Our people are really highly trained and they do great work. We had 258 structure fires last year, which is right in line with what we've had traditionally over the last several decades. Director McCarty is correct that we don't have tons of fires in town, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have a really good fire safety division as well, because they're out there doing inspections on the businesses in town and making sure that they do not have high risk factors within those structures. So that's one of the good things about that part. The fact is that we run twice as many calls as we did when I started. In that time, we haven't added a single firehouse, a single fire truck, a single fire crew. We cover 124 square miles, which is about twice as much as a lot of our comparables. I believe that the amount of square mileage coverage for Peoria and Bloomington is in the 60 to 70 range, square miles wise. In our business, the main thing is response time. When you have a large area to cover and you don't have enough apparatus to do that, you don't have enough crews to do that, that is what makes our job precarious and does not allow us to serve the people in this community the way that they should be. The men and women of the Springfield Fire Department are acutely aware of the fact that we are a department that has a lot of light on us, good and bad. We've seen that in the last 18 months. We've been on quite the roller coaster ride, and a lot of that has to do with a number of things, one of which is this study. It was able to come in and give us an outside perspective, and I welcomed that. There were some people who had some trepidation about bringing in an outside entity to look at our operations, and as Director McCarty said, there were some people who thought that this was something that, okay, now they're coming to get us. And I always welcomed it because we're a Class 1 department. We do things the right way. And when they came in, that is pretty much in 209 pages what they said, is that we have a fire department that does the right things the right way and provide the right type of service, right sized for this community. We pay attention to the fact that the SFD has been a common topic of discussion for this group too. We really did welcome the opportunity today to come in and talk about that with you. But I don't want to take up too much time, but to summarize, in the 209-page report provided review and recommendations for operations and planning, and I think within that, it gave us both some positives and some negatives for us to look at, and I'm sure that during the rest of this program we'll discuss those back and forth. But I wanted to thank the mayor and Director McCarty for bringing in that, because the CPSM, because from my perspective, there's nothing more valuable than having a fresh perspective. I've grown up in this particular organization for 23 years, and like I said, my father and my uncle were on it for my entire life. So I have only seen what we have. So for them to bring in a fresh set of eyes, I think was really good. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Happy birthday, Chief. I'll sing to you later. But with regards to this report in particular, I think Director McCarty summed it up pretty well. It was a way to assess where we're at with the fire department, how we can put in best practices that are used across the country. And really, it did codify the direction we're going. And if we didn't have a good report as far as the glowing remarks regarding the fire department, we should all felt appalled, because we do pay for that Class 1 service. We train our firefighters to reach that level. We provide the training, we provide the equipment for that. But the direction forward, and I've challenged all our departments, during the pandemic, how are we providing services post-pandemic as best as possible? So, that's the direction we wanted to go, but Director McCarty's correct with regards to 2018, very challenging. And, you don't want all your financial resources with the city being absolved by any one department at a detriment of another. And so that's what we're trying to do, because we have a vast amount of services to provide, whether it's public works, police department, fire department, administrative, the utility. So we have to look at it collectively. So each one of us have a role to play. Director McCarty, of course, is a financial person.
Makes me the bad guy.
Chief Blau, of course, presents the fire department process. The city council members, Alderman McMiniman beats the drum of the pensions and what happens and the importance of that. And then we really appreciate the advocacy of Bob Gray through the years. And regardless, if it's this issue or a different issue, we should be open to critiques. I like, I don't mind being criticized as long as they have solutions as well, because everybody can point out, here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem. How do you resolve it? So that's what the report is. It's more for me is an action report, because too many times we've had reports of the fire studies where we should relocate on the shelf and nothing happened. So we've known for decades that we wanted a fire station or should relocate fire stations. It was codified through numerous reports, and we are staffed, and this is all I'm going to say about Manning, just so everybody understands, we're staffed. We have enough staff to have 14 fire stations, but we only have 12. And so that is a problem in itself where you cannot provide the services out west. With Panther Creek, Piper Glen, they have a 6-minute to 8-minute response time, depending on what happens, and where we should be at the goal of 4-minute response time throughout the city. So, we can argue about fire calls or EMS. We know that EMS calls are going up, and EMS calls are all over the city, but our goal is to provide 4-minute response time throughout the city. So we're able to build a new station out in the western quadrant because we own property through CWLP out there off Woodside Road. We are finally relocating the one that, it's been forced relocation where by Isles Park because of the railroad over to 11th and Ash. We're working through that process. But the other one that, the reason to move it originally was because of Starbucks on Chatham Road, because of it, just the congestion to move it out west. But if you look at the fire lineup, you have a station by Christ the King. Then you have the one right there by Starbucks, right off Chatham Road. You just drive up Chatham Road. And then the other one, you go to North Grand and you have to take a right. I think it's between MacArthur and Walnut. There's the other one. Nothing out west. So essentially what we're doing is putting that out by Veterans where it should be. And now you have that triangle impact of coverage. And so that's the direction we're trying to take. With the report in itself, it touched on a lot of things, EMS, the coverage somewhat, the structure, because as was pointed out, we're structured pre-pandemic. What's post-pandemic services look like? How do we construct the fire stations for tomorrow? That's what we're looking at right now. But the other part of it that wasn't mentioned that we are striving for is the workforce for tomorrow, because we want to be a diversified workforce as much as possible moving that direction. We have put in place an advisory group. It's made up of former Alderman Alan Woodson, former Alderwoman Gail Simpson, where I've asked them to serve on it because they understand the variables associated with the fire department. Also, Alderman Chuck Redpass on there, as well as the chief or his representative and the union. So we can have that discussion because we're all impacted by it, but we cannot ignore the fact that we all have to work together along with our advocates, whether it's the community advocates or at the state legislature, because they take action that impacts our service immensely and our budget immensely. So we all have to work collectively to really provide the Class 1 service, not only in the fire department, but we want it in the Public Works Department, Police Department, and all the departments throughout the city, and how best do we make that happen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right at 5 minutes. Bob.
Putting me under the pressure here. I want to commend the mayor, the city council, and the chief for facilitating this analysis of the Springfield Fire Department. I believe the authors and the organization are more than credible and professional, and I thought the study was quite good, to be very honest with you. In my opinion, the most important statement in the study is on page 148. In the past, fire departments occasionally made EMS calls for service Today, many fire departments are primarily EMS service providers that also perform a fire duty. Springfield is certainly a case in point. In 2019, Springfield Fire Department responded to 19,668 calls. 264 were structural fire calls. 233 were outside fire calls. 2.5% of the total calls actually involved a fire. The study also cites national studies showing only about 20% of EMS calls require advanced life support, meaning that 80% only need an ambulance crew and likely did not require lights and siren response and first provider. In Springfield, the study showed about 54% of EMS calls were ALS related, but the remaining 46% needed really only some kind of ambulance crew. I'm going to jump to what I consider the major recommendation, Recommendation 28. The city consider, in their discussion in the study, EMS Alternative 2. And let me mention that just a little bit. This would involve establishing and really, I think, improving a true EMD response system. I can't get into details because I don't know enough, but our dispatch in 9/11 also needs to be in this discussion because our calls and the expenses going with all of this are also related directly to being able to know what those calls are. This would seem pretty responsible. The recommendation is that the fire department does not need to respond to what they describe as Alpha and Bravo calls, which do not need the normal life safety deal. This would seem workable because we have 3 private ambulance companies or emergency companies in the city also performing almost, in many cases, the same work the fire department is. In other words, they're called, one of them is called on every one of those 19,000 calls. That just doesn't seem to be logical and seems to be a rather major amount of duplication. If Springfield wants to be a vibrant, growing community that's internationally attractive to job seekers and job creators, then we need to have this community discussion on where our money goes. The reason the fire department needs an overview is that it's the second highest budget item in the budget. The police, of course, is number 1. Together, in about a year, year and a half, 2 years at the most, they will be at about $100 million of our city budget. Our city budget probably will be lucky to be 125, 130, 135 million at that point, and we'll be getting back to where we were that Bill and the mayor mentioned earlier. This is something that does really need to be looked at. And so I certainly believe that we can have a state-of-the-art, cutting-edge fire department. I think we can have a state-of-the-art, cutting-edge emergency service program. I think it ought to be some kind of hybrid public-private operation. It kind of is now, but with no rules. And I know the thing is there's emergency people, there are people meeting on this. It's a bigger piece than it seems, and there are more people involved than just the fire department or just the city. But we definitely need this community conversation. This is really about the greater good, the very future of Springfield. We can't continue in the way we're doing it. Also, we need a report, an analysis of the police department this coming year for almost all the same reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So now we're going to have our discussion time amongst the panelists. And I think, given what Bob just said, I think the place possibly to start is with the chief or somebody. How do you respond when people talk about kind of issues of alignment or needing to improve response times? I saw that in the report too. How do you approach this?
I'll take that. Response times, as I said earlier, is really the lifeblood of what makes the services that we provide to the community flow. And quite frankly, we recognize that a large percentage, about half of our calls are medical in nature right now. But those are services that obviously have a hole that need to be filled by us. We have 3 private ambulance companies in town. They are struggling just like every other segment of the economy right now as far as attracting high quality workers and retaining those workers. One of the companies actually didn't have any ambulances on the street for a certain period of time recently. So we are generally, and I would never lob grenades at the ambulance companies. They work hard, they do great work, but they are strapped just like everybody else to provide services because they can't get quality people. Our people are trained to a high standard. Most of our fire department, every day on all of our engines, there's somebody who can push drugs, that can defibrillate you if you're having cardiac arrest, that can intubate you, that can do all sorts of high-level services until that ambulance company gets there. There's 12 stations currently, 13 on the way, that provide services to everybody. On a good day, we have 6, 7, maybe 8 ambulances in town. Those ambulance companies are also providing services as far as from hospitals or from nursing homes, as far as private transportation between some of those. So as far as the nature of the services that we provide, I would say we have adapted. We are looking at the future. We are looking at what does this look like in 10, 20 years. It is medical services. That's why we provide them. As if we didn't, you would see much longer wait times on everything else. And as far as changing over to more of a medical than fire, that's all well and good, but the ISO ratings only deal with fire protection. They don't care one iota about what type of medical services that you provide. So our ISO rating, let's say that, okay, we think that you could turn 12 engine houses into 6 fire trucks and 6 ambulances. Okay, that sounds like, oh, well, you do a lot of medical work, that sounds fine. Our response times on those fires would skyrocket. Our ISO rating would go to 8 or 10, and you would see, ISO is an insurance services organization that determines what type of insurance rates you're going to pay. You would see a change in residential. I don't know in Illinois how much residential you would see, but there would be a difference, but definitely in your business sector, which trickles down to all of us.
I'm going to go to the mayor in just a second, but let me ask you a question, Chief Blow. You just said that response times would skyrocket. Do you have estimates of how much it would go up?
No, because we've never studied it. We've never had a situation where we've said we're going to go to six engines. So
have other cities of a similar size tried this? And
not that I know of.
Okay, all right.
I mean, we did go to. There are some cities that have gone to the squads concept, which we had here as well. But what that does is you have to be really careful with that, because then you have medical providing companies that don't have any water. So then when that company arrives on scene for a fire.
Not very good without water.
No, we can't do a lot of good at that point.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
And just to make a short comment with regards to that, we're moving stations right now, and you get the feedback from the public of the concern of moving a station further away. So if you start reducing trucks for fires, there will be great concern. So the bottom line is nobody knows where a fire is going to occur, and so that's why you want that blanket coverage, but it comes with a cost. So with regards to the cost, we need to look at the per capita cost for our individuals and then also apply that per capita cost to the fire districts that we protect. I think there's over 10? How many
Yes.
fire protection districts? And so right now, we're capped by the state legislature of what we can charge, but how it should work is each one of us are taxpayers, if you live in the city of Springfield, of the Class 1 Fire Department. It's just not what we pay operationally, it's what we pay on the pension side. Just real simple math formula, figure out what it is per person and apply to each fire district that same amount. And I imagine we would get a lot more than what we currently get. So that's one challenging part. The other one is, I'll just put it out there, we are looking at the fairgrounds. We provide fire service there. Do they need fire service, or is it better just to have EMS service out there, because that's most of the calls on the fairgrounds, and that station could be better relocated. The challenge for us is the fairgrounds is not in the city, and so that's kind of a struggle in it, or conflicting with regards to that. But one thing Bob did point out, that the report pointed out, that we are going to have those discussions, is 911 calls. How do you prioritize those and send the right apparatus or the right response to the calls of service? So we will be taking a look at that. With regards to EMS, I think the union definitely will disagree with me. The chief, he might be on the board or whatever. I think it will be a hybrid model. We are doing it right now with the private sector, with the ambulance services, the hospitals, and that has to continue. I've talked to other cities. They said you cannot bear the cost of EMS services, because you know how the math works. It'll start with, okay, we have paramedics, and then pretty soon you'll probably have all firefighters doing paramedic work, and it's just not cost prohibitive. So it can be a great way to train up-and-comers to the fire department, but I'm a firm believer it should be a private-public partnership like it is now. We just have to really take a look at that process and assess it and move it in that direction. And one of the initiatives, I think it was in the report, was the emergency director, and the chief's taken an initiative to move that, working with Director McCarty, moving that direction, so we have an EMS coordinator to really sink into that important issue to all of us.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned the cost item, and Director McCarty alluded to it in his opening comments. One of the things that I didn't see when I read through the study was a lot of discussion explicitly of cost and of the cost alternatives. Is there a process in place to kind of cost this out, to say, if we go to a hybrid model, if we add a station, if we, how much extra is going to put on the budget? Have we scored that?
Well, we haven't yet, because if you look at the report, there are a multitude of alternatives that are presented, and we're not in a position right now to go through and look at every single alternative and try and cost it out, because there's just so much that would go into each one. What we're doing is, the mayor had mentioned earlier, he's formed a task force to look at some of the alternatives, and I think as the task force moves through that and we look at and come up with things that are viable, at that point in time, we'll start putting pen to paper and trying to cost those out. But to try and spend time with the little staff that we have and all the other things we do to try and cost out every alternative, it's just not feasible.
Sure. So it takes time. We can look forward to something coming out relatively soon.
Yes, certainly, I hope so. But I will say, you said something about adding costs, and that is the predicament that we're in. We want to have a top-notch fire department, and it's great to have the Class 1. The city wasn't Class 1 for a number of years. So, your reliance or belief on the importance of that is, in the eye of the beholder. I have to understand that. And I may not be, I understand the chief is very proud of the Class 1, but for a while we were Class 2 or 3. The question is, what services do the people want, and how much do they want to pay for it? That's what it comes down to. And there have been many times, and like I said, the 11 years plus that I've been there, that we run into some serious economic issues. And we will again. If it hadn't been for the pandemic, we'd be having a much tougher conversation, because the pandemic came in and provided an opportunity for the city to get well fiscally. And right now, we're in very good financial shape in terms of our fund balance. But all you got to do is turn on CNBC or read any of the economists right now. And Doc, I know, Dr. Kriz, I know that you probably know better than anybody in this room what's coming, or at least what people believe is coming, and that is a recession. So all that great fiscal shape that we're in right now is going to be in peril as we move forward over the next couple of years, especially if a recession hits. From day one, since I know I started in 2011, the mantra around the city started with Mayor Houston, it's continued with Mayor Langfelder, is we have to be ready for the next big downturn. We can't get caught flat-footed like the city did in 2008 when they had to do layoffs and they had to do furloughs and they had to brown out, brown out firehouses. We don't want to do that, and we haven't had to do that because we've been ready, and we're ready now. But the simple fact is these things happen in cycles. There will be another down cycle. Then we'll be talking about either raising taxes, which most people don't want to do, or we'll be talking about cutting services out of departments.
Yeah.
We've already cut services and people out of a lot of departments. The fire department is the one area, like I said, has been relatively unscathed. Nobody wants to cut services. The question is, can we do it better? Can we do it more cost-effective given how things and times have changed?
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at.
And I think that it very much comes through in the report also. And I just take a moment to say something and then give a plug for UIS and one of my colleagues. But the other thing that's coming is a $195 billion fiscal cliff. Dr. Bunch has given presentations on what's going to happen when the federal government is no longer sending so much money to state and local governments. So that's something that's coming. Bob, do you want to take a minute and respond to anything that's been said?
Yeah, if we could, there are two or three of these things that get tossed out there, and I think they need clarified a little bit. The ISO rating, about 4 or 5 years ago, the city dropped. It was Class 1 for a long time, and I give them a great deal of credit for that. But the fact that it's only fire-related leads you to have some questions on the importance. And then secondly, we dropped to Class 2 and then Class 3 just about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe less than that. And while I commend the chief and the fire department of getting us back to Class 1, I wonder what the damages were. I'm not aware that during that period that we dropped to Class 2 or Class 3 that anybody's insurance got raised. Now, they may have. I don't know if any of you had your house insurance raised. It always raises, but I certainly saw nothing of any comments anywhere that the ISO rating made any difference on anything. Now, it's nice to have, but I'm not sure there's any evidence, and the mayor's implying that it costs a lot of money to have that ISO rating. I bet it does, and so forth. So I wonder about that. That seems to be a question that could come up. The other thing is the 9 fire districts around the city that the city provides fire protection and emergency response for. This, I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but there are 9 little fire districts, and they have different names, but they cover Leland Grove and Southern View and Grandview and Jerome and quite a bit of Woodside unincorporated and so forth. And there's some people there. There's no question about that. In most cases, it's totally surrounded by the city. And so forth. And the calls, I did go through the calls a little bit. There is research on the calls. All that can be costed out a little bit. Those fired, and in Springfield, if I don't want to get into this too deep, Springfield is a city fire department, not a fire district. There's a difference. There are 29 fire districts in the county, of which we have no business having 29 fire districts in the county, but that's a whole nother deal. But 9 of them touch the city around or within. They have no volunteers, they have no chief, they have no staff, they provide no services. They collect some property tax money, each of those, and basically that property tax money ends up coming to Springfield for the service.
Not all of it, unfortunately.
Well,
And we provide all the services. We
I
don't
know.
get all of the money. But
yeah.
Right.
Well, you get most of it, and you should get more. I won't disagree with that. But let's say that altogether it's 900,000. It's in that ballpark. And when you get I, for one, had recommended that those 9 at least be consolidated to 1. And that would provide more money because each of those districts has to have a legal service and has to have a auditing service and has to publish whatever and so forth.
And
It's not big money.
I think we did a segment here about 2 years ago on consolidation, so municipal consolidation, not municipal, but
Right.
fire district consolidation could help, is what you're saying.
But the other thing is then, if you take everything that I can read and what I think I know on the fire department, Springfield citizens, tax-paying citizens in Springfield are subsidizing the fire protection for all of those communities and so forth, because, and so forth. That may be fine, that may be what the people want, but it sounds to me like that's over a short period of time, several $1 million that could be better spent in Springfield on roads and sewers and streets and making this the kind of attractive city that we ought to see in the future.
So that sounds like something that maybe the commission would want to look at as they move forward. Mr. Mayor, you want to say?
Real quick on the ISO rating, the last time it was achieved was in the late 1990s, I believe. And then, so the cost of the fire department's gone up. The reason we were able to attain it is some changes internally that Chief Helmerich at the time was committed to and the command staff. So they made the adjustments within the operations of the department, and that got us the ISO rating. But regardless, the budget was the same. But it is expensive, because you have to provide that fire protection, and that's what it goes to. What's the cost of that fire protection? And the other districts are definitely part of that, and it's a larger discussion than we can do today. But we are paying it regardless if we're class 2 or 3. That budget has not changed very much, but we have been able to make adjustments within the structure, the management structure, to get us back to the ISO rating. And why that is important for myself, I think it impacts the commercial side more than the residential. So from an economic development standpoint, you can use that as a driver to promote to other businesses or looking to relocate, things of that nature. But, maybe that's a discussion for a referendum. Is it important to have that, because it's the residents that pay for that coverage? And is it important to all of us? But I'm a firm believer. I think it does have its benefits. I think the budget-wise, the way the contract is, the way the structure of the department is, we're going to pay, we're at that high level of budget anyway. We might as well maximize it. The report is hopefully showing us ways to be more efficient and how can we work with the union and the administration. If we need to take action at the state legislature, how do we work collectively to really make us more efficient than we currently might be with better practices?
4 or 5 years ago, you guys bought 2 or 3 units. I don't know their squads. I don't know the right terminology for emergency type medical work. That seemed to be the most logical move the fire department had made in years. It seemed to be looking at the future. The council paid, $250,000 for each of them. I don't know what the pricing was and so forth. Those are gone. Why are those gone? And was that a victim of the ISO? You had to get rid of them, so you appease the fire gods at ISO. That doesn't make any sense. It seems to me all of a sudden, out of the blue, we had some progress, and then it all went to hell.
Chief?
Well, the main reason for getting rid of the squads was that it did not provide the fire coverage that we wanted. We had, and all of this, when you're in a vacuum, seems just fine as far as we're saving money by doing this. This cuts costs. What actually it came down to was there was a fire call, and I want to say it was in 17 or 18, out on the lake. And one of the squads was stationed at Stevenson Drive, which is one of our multi-company houses. We have a truck there that does not carry water. It has an aerial ladder. And then we used to have an engine there, and we replaced it with a squad, which does not have water. So it was on East Lake Drive, I believe, or just there off of, and it pulled up on scene, didn't have any water, and our people had to go and tell the people, we're here, but we can't put your fire out. It was in a particular area that was difficult for the other surrounding engines to get to in a decent amount of time, and they suffered a significant loss on their house because of it. It's really easy to say, well, we could save X amount of dollars on this and X amount of dollars on that if we only did this. But when it comes down to somebody losing their home, us not providing the right type of service when it happens to you, it makes us, the fire department, it made Barry Helmrichs, it made his staff re-examine, should we change back to making sure that we have the name fire department is in there for a reason. We are supposed to provide fire protection. And what that did is lessen that amount and made us rethink this. Well, we can still provide the medical out of an engine and provide the fire department and provide the fire service that we need to. And that's one of the reasons why we went back to that.
Okay, appreciate that. With that, our 20-minute discussion time is done. We have about 15 minutes for audience questions. We'll start right here. You, sir.
First of all, as a physician, I'd like to compliment everybody involved in the cross-training of our fire personnel. The numbers show that was the right decision. My second question is, what is the comparison between it has been suggested that the private companies provide more of the emergency health-related responses. What's the difference in response time between the private companies and the fire companies which are on hand to provide those services?
It's significantly different. I don't have right offhand. We don't always have their statistics, their response time statistics available to us. Those are kind of proprietary, for lack of a better word. I will tell you that we, over the last few months have seen an increase. I explained earlier that, that they're having problems staffing, as just like a lot of industries in this country are. I think that if we did a hybrid model, which we have looked at as far as, and that is more of a cost sharing, revenue sharing idea. We would look pretty hard at whether we would change the amount of services that we actually provided, considering that we already have the stations where they're at, they're already manned, but the ability to recapture some of those costs and revenues, I think, is what would be the most beneficial from our standpoint, and we've talked about that with at least one of the ambulance companies already. I think that there's always room for improvement, but I think that the type of responses that we provide, which are generally within 4 minutes, is right where you want to be. And the ambulance companies, I will tell you this, it's not 4 minutes, and that's not due to, once again, the last thing I'm going to do is throw rocks at the people who own these ambulance companies and the people who put in hard work on those ambulances, because it's just a numbers game. If you only have 6 ambulances in town, you got 12 fire trucks, chances are you're going to have faster response times by us. So I can try and find that information out and put it and get it for everybody to put out later. I would guess, I know that it's a higher response time than mine, but I don't want to guess as to what it is.
Thanks, Chief. There's a question over here on my left.
Good morning, and on behalf, as the longtime treasurer of the South Oak Knolls Fire Protection District, I apologize for all my deadbeat neighbors in Leland Grove that don't pay their taxes for the fire services that they get. It is about $200,000 a year, so hopefully that at least helps. But my quick question is there any way to bill for the medical services back to insurance or Medicare or Medicaid or anything that it would at least plug some of the budget hole on the services we're providing for medical? That seems to be, to me, if it was doable, the easiest way to try to bring some revenue back into the equation. Thanks.
Thank
You want to take it?
Either one of us. There is, and there are some options that we're looking at, especially, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, especially there are many instances where our firefighters are riding in ambulances back to the hospital because the folks in the ambulances don't have a higher level or even the same level of life support training. A lot of our folks are, like the Chief said, they're paramedics, so they're ALS trained. Most of ours are IMT, so they're intermediate medical specialists. There are some instances, given the challenges that the ambulances are facing these days, where they're out there with just, the least amount of life support. So you can't downgrade service and transport, which means our firefighters often have to ride back in ambulances to the hospital. In those cases, there absolutely is an opportunity for us to try and share in that revenue because we are providing that service. And Chief, I'll let you pick up from there. I think there might be some other opportunities.
Right. We've already talked to the ambulance companies, and actually they are very receptive to that. For about the last 6 to 8 months, the ambulance company and HSHS, Memorial Health, we've all started a new system of an EMTB transport system, which means that you have EMT basics, which aren't able to administer the same type of care via, IV meds and defibrillation and intubation and some other skills that they are just not trained to do yet. Our people will write in on calls for that. The ambulances have been very receptive to doing some type of a revenue sharing on that. Our people have ridden in forever on when there's a cardiac arrest, when there's a significant type of a medical event like that, our people write in all the time. So that would be something else that we would look at. Can we at least, split the baby on some of this stuff so that we can replace some of our costs, help our people and our budget out as far as that goes. We are looking at it. Thank you.
The other thing, and I'm going to try and use my voice, I hope the cameras are able to pick it up without a microphone, but the other thing that was mentioned in the report, I know it's a much less kind of trenchant thing, was the possibility of charging fees for fire prevention inspections. Is that something you're looking at?
Yeah, we're looking at all aspects of the report. And right now, of course, we're looking at the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, what we can put in place. There'll be more difficult discussions that will take more time, but we'll look at every aspect of what's been suggested and, bring forward what we think we can, and then the others will, be, if there's questions, we'll say why we didn't bring that forward as the advisory group.
Just to tag on to that too, most communities do charge for a lot of those services. We have not, and it's been that, and I totally understand. We've had discussions in the past, both myself and previous fire chiefs, and a lot of that is walking that tightrope of wanting to charge for services to try and earn some revenue, at the same time trying to be as business friendly as possible too, because we know that a lot of the businesses in town, they already are getting hit with certain things. So that's one of the tightropes that we've tried to walk with that.
I appreciate that. Questions?
Have you ever considered, as maybe a pilot basis, where you'd put an additional squad, like you used to have, but still have an engine, so that if it's a fire call, they hop in the engine. If it's a medical call, they hop in the squad?
There are models for that. Some smaller fire departments across the country do that. They call them hop units or hop squads, and they hop on whichever piece of apparatus makes more sense for that call. From my perspective, I don't know how much sense it makes from a cost basis, in that then you have to have two different types of apparatus. So you have to purchase that apparatus, you have to maintain it, you still have to have a certain amount of staffing for it. And then the other concern that we have, and I'm not saying this is a big concern, but firefighters are a strange bunch. We are trained to look at what is the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario is that we take that medical unit out on a call, and on our way back a fire comes in and we're not in the right stuff. So then we have to go back to the house, we have to change out, we have to put on all our clothes and then respond. And so it puts us behind the 8 ball, whereas if we were just in a fire unit in the first place, you respond straight there and you don't have that issue. Like I said, that's not something that would happen daily or weekly, but we are worst case scenario folks, because that's what we walk into a lot, so.
Thank you.
This kind of hops on his question, but is there ever an organizational paradigm in which we have a non-connected, city-owned emergency EMT operation in which we bill under a GMT program? Most Medicaid and Medicare and all the exchange insurance programs pay for emergency transportation. So instead of taking up engine space, is there a paradigm in which we have a competitive public partner that guarantees medical services in which we could bill back through our Medicaid and Medicare provider system?
There is. There was an alternative that was given under the EMS options as far as what we could implement. The mayor and Director McCarty and I have talked about that, and it is the most, as far as providing a fire EMT ambulance company that does transport, it is the largest undertaking of the 4 or 5 that they suggested. It is the most expensive, and it's one of those things where we don't know whether it would be something that would be revenue neutral. Would it cost the citizens more money, or would we have revenue positive? I mean, would we be able to actually make enough money through ambulance service that it would help our operations? And that's a really hard thing to project. We have some comparables that do well, and we have some that don't. So that's something we've talked about. It's definitely an option. But I think that we've talked about more of a hybrid, trying to do other options first. I would say that it's one of those, maybe one of the last things that we would try if we think that that's what we need to do. Jump in if I'm wrong.
No, I think that's right. Dan, if I understand your question correctly, were you talking about us getting into the ambulance business, or were you talking about partnering with an outside entity? Yeah.
We operate under municipal agreements for Medicaid and Medicare. I think all of the Obamacare and subsidy insurance companies are required to pay for emergency transportation and emergency services. So a good way to bill back for it is to make it, like this wouldn't be a new thing. Chicago does it. Chicago's
Right. Rockford does it, Chicago does it. And I'll say a couple of things. One, he's right. That is the most capital intensive, time intensive approach, number one. Number two, I'll be honest with you, other cities that we've talked to about it, who are doing it, have told us don't do it. They wouldn't recommend it. Better off going with the setup that we have now, where you've got private ambulance companies that we work with and find a way, the mayor's hybrid approach that he's talking about, find a way to at least share in the revenue that they get without expending any more resources on our part than we already do. It's really just about getting reimbursed for the stuff we're already doing to help our budget out. That's the approach we're moving in that direction.
Yeah. Great. We are at 9 o'clock by my watch or phone. I want to thank, first of all, the audience for the great questions. Thank the panelists for their input, and I think I can speak for a lot of people and say I look forward to the commission's work and a lot of the analysis that will come out of it. And maybe we can meet here in a year or 2 years and see if we have implementation.
Meet on my birthday next year.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
June 24th.
Same time, same place.
So with that, I believe we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.